This isn't the place for people like you." The woman who said it wore a white GI with a black belt tied in a knot that had clearly been practiced in a mirror, more than it had ever been earned on a mat, standing shoulder to shoulder with two other women dressed identically, all three of them looking at the woman in front of them the way people look at something that has wandered into the wrong room by mistake. Renata Alvarez stood near the entrance of the Ironhold dojo, in plain gray sweatpants and an old faded t-shirt, one hand resting lightly on the shoulder of her 6-year-old son, Mateo, who was clutching a small worn duffel bag against his chest, like it might be taken from him. "I have a trial class scheduled," Renata said evenly. "For my son, for 6-year-old's beginner group," the black belt woman said, glancing pointedly at Renata's clothing. At the duffel bag, with its fraying zipper, at the flat, unbothered way Renata stood without flinching. "This dojo has a certain standard, that's all I'm saying. Families here tend to be a particular kind of committed." Her name was Priscilla Danforth, and she had been the loudest, most visible presence at Ironhold for the better part of 3 years, not because she was the most skilled student on the mat, but because her husband sat on the dojo's advisory board and had personally funded the new equipment room, a fact she mentioned with impressive regularity to anyone who would listen. The two women beside her, Deb and Kimberly, nodded along the way. People nod when agreement costs them nothing, and dissent might cost them a friendship. That Mateo shifted closer to his mother's leg, sensing, in the specific unspoken way children sense these things, that something in the room had turned unkind. "He's 6, Renata said, her voice still level, still calm. "He wants to learn karate." I called ahead. "There's a trial class in 10 minutes. Priscilla's eyes moved down, deliberately and unmistakably, taking in Renata's sweatpants, the duffel bag, the absence of a wedding ring, the general absence of the specific polish that Priscilla had decided, somewhere along the way, was a prerequisite for belonging in this building. "Where's Dad?" she asked, in a tone that pretended at politeness while doing something considerably less polite underneath it. "Not in the picture," Renata said simply, offering nothing further. "Of course," Priscilla said, with a small knowing look toward Deb and Kimberly that needed no translation. "Well, I just think it's fair to warn you. Some of the other parents here are quite serious about the culture of this place. It might not be the right fit." However, neither Priscilla nor her two companions had the faintest idea that the woman they were quietly, thoroughly dismissing in a gray t-shirt and worn sweatpants had once held a national title in the exact discipline practiced on the mats behind them, and that the dojo's own owner was about to walk through the door and recognize her before Renata had said another word. Renata Alvarez had competed at the national level in traditional karate for 6 years in her 20s, culminating in a national championship title that had, for a brief window, made her name reasonably well known within the specific, insular world of competitive martial arts. She'd walked away from competition at 29, not from any loss of ability, but because her mother had gotten sick, and the travel and training schedule that competition demanded had become impossible to sustain alongside caregiving. She'd stepped back further after Mateo was born, raising him largely on her own after his father left before his 2nd birthday, working 2 jobs that had nothing to do with martial arts and everything to do with keeping a roof over both their heads. She hadn't set foot on a mat in almost 4 years. She'd chosen Ironhold for Mateo specifically because it was close to their apartment and the trial class was free, not because of anything she knew about its culture, its politics, or the particular species of parent it apparently attracted. She'd worn sweatpants because they were comfortable, and because she genuinely hadn't considered walking through the door. That comfort might be read as a disqualification. "Renata Alvarez," the voice came from behind Priscilla, and it belonged to a broad-shouldered man in his 50s wearing a faded Ironhold instructor's shirt, sleeves pushed up, gray at the temples, standing very still near the office doorway with an expression that had shifted in the space of a single word, from routine Tuesday afternoon distraction to something considerably more alert. Priscilla turned, confused by the sudden change in the room's atmosphere. "That's right," Renata said, and for the first time since walking in, something flickered across her face. Not surprise, exactly. More like the recognition of someone realizing an old, quiet part of her life had just been spoken aloud in a room where she hadn't expected it. "I'm Frank Ostrowski," the man said, crossing the floor with his hand extended. "I run this place. I watched your finals match in the 2014 Nationals from the 3rd row. I've told that story to every advanced student who's walked through this door for the last 10 years. Priscilla's mouth opened slightly and produced no sound. "You're being modest," Frank continued, still shaking Renata's hand, apparently entirely unaware, or perhaps entirely aware, in a way that suited him fine, of the conversation he'd just interrupted. "That match is still used in some coaching circles as a teaching example. The counter you ran in the 3rd round changed how a lot of instructors, myself included, taught defensive footwork for the next several years." Deb and Kimberly had gone very quiet. Priscilla's black belt, tied with such careful precision that morning, suddenly looked, to anyone paying close attention, like exactly what it was, a symbol worn by someone whose actual time on a competitive mat added up to considerably less than the 6-year-old boy's mother, standing 3 feet away from her. I didn't realize, Priscilla said, the sentence trailing off into nothing, because there was, in that particular moment, no version of it that could be finished without confirming exactly what she'd assumed 30 seconds earlier, and exactly how wrong that assumption had been. Mateo, Frank said, crouching down to the boy's eye level, your mama's kind of a legend around here, even if nobody's mentioned it yet. You ready for your trial class? Mateo, still holding tightly to his duffel bag, looked up at his mother with an expression that had shifted from uncertainty into something closer to quiet. Not because he'd fully understood what had just happened, but because he understood, in the way children understand these things intuitively, that his mother had just been proven right about something without needing to raise her voice to prove it. Actually, Renata said, looking at Frank, then briefly, without any particular heat in her expression, at Priscilla, would it be all right if I got back on the map myself sometime? It's been a while. I think I'd like to. Frank didn't hesitate. I'd be honored. We've got an advanced adult class Thursday evenings, if you're interested, though I suspect within a month you'll be teaching half of it. Renata returned to Ironhold that Thursday, and most Thursdays after. She never mentioned the encounter with Priscilla again, and to her credit, she didn't need to. Word travels fast in small doses, and within a few weeks, Priscilla Danforth's habit of commenting on which families did and didn't belong at Ironhold had quietly, noticeably stopped. Mateo is 9 now, 3 belts into his own training, and asks his mother, more often than she has patience for some mornings, to show him the counter from the 2014 finals one more time. She always says yes. Frank still tells new students the story sometimes, usually during their first week, usually as a way of making a point that has nothing to do with karate technique and everything to do with what actually happens on his mats. You'll meet all kinds of people in that GI, he says. Some of them will look like they don't belong here, by whatever standard you've quietly decided matters. Pay attention anyway. The person you're least prepared to respect is sometimes the one who has the most to teach you. If you believe that judging people by their appearance says more about the person judging than the person being judged, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that real strength rarely needs to announce itself.